What's up? Hey, hello, everyone. Wow. So today we are back going to be talking about Survivor season 46. We are on the third episode. So my name is Rachel.
I'm Alyssa, and geez Louise, I feel like this episode, I was waiting for something interesting to happen, and then, as always, Medivacs ruined it.
It just be how it be do, I guess. I thought this episode was funny. Like seeing Banu just so sad the entire time to then we unfortunately hear about Randon being pulled from the game, and then we see Banu just so happy and so excited that God has answered his prayers and he's not getting eliminated this week. I just thought it was so funny.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of funny. I feel like my thing is, though, it seems so inconsistent to me. Sometimes when there's Medivacs, they still do tribal council, and sometimes when there's Medivacs, they don't do tribal council. I would love to see the Survivor rulebook and figure out when they're doing a tribal council after a Medivac and when they're like, nope, this counts as our vote out for the week. Just because I feel like in 26-day Survivor, it's actually a good thing. Like if you can have someone medically evacuated and then have someone also voted out, just because I feel like towards the end, the vote outs get really crunched together. So it would almost be a good thing to have fewer people voted out in the back half, but I guess they don't see it the same way I do.
Get a double elimination in there. I feel like in the new era, it seems like if there is a medevac, then there is no tribal council. I feel like in the past, though, maybe it's like we've seen medevacs and then the team still goes a tribal or a tribal still happens kind of thing. I feel like in the new era, it's like, okay, it's a skipped round kind of thing.
Which again, I think is so silly because in the new era, that's when you need the medevacs the most because you have fewer days to get out the same amount of people.
True. So we start off this episode. I guess it's like a Banu episode, really. It's like a Banu full circle moment. I feel like he's
Mm-hmm.
sad all episode, which is warranted because he is maybe most likely probably going to be the person getting voted out if Purple loses immunity again. I just thought it was also funny that he got so many confessionals this entire episode, moping and being sad about potentially getting voted out. And then, like, intermixed in there, you get like the funny Banu scenes where he's like talking on and on about Kenzie and Kenzie being a mermaid dragon, which I thought was funny, odd description of Kenzie.
Yeah, I feel like the thing about Banu is he just has such a big personality that everything he says just seems so extra. Just because he is so extra and not necessarily in a bad way. It's just he always he goes from these emotional highs to emotional lows. Like he bursts into tears when he's on the journey and I'm kind of like seems like it's kind of exhausting to be Banu.
True. A lot of ups, a lot of downs. And then we see the scene of Q and Banu talking, and Q calls Banu a Philip to his Boston Rob. And then later in the episode, he calls Philip or calls Banu a liability to his face. I thought that was so funny also. It's like, okay, the Philip to my Boston Rob one, you want to be told. The liability one to your face, I feel like that's more negative. I wouldn't want to be told that. Like, if someone else on the season views you as a Philip, I don't think that's a bad thing. They might want to bring you along to the end. They think they can beat you. They don't think you're a good Survivor player, that you're more of a follower. I think that's a good thing. Liability, on the other hand, I'm like, don't say that to my face. That is not positive because it just makes you seem more like a loose cannon.
I mean, I feel like being told you're a Philip isn't really a good thing either. Just because, like you said, it's all these things where they're saying, you're not a good Survivor player. I think I can win over you. That's not a super great fun time.
I think if you're like a smart Survivor player, like if someone said to Hunter that he's a Philip, like we see later in the episode, Hunter will be like, heck yeah, I want to be called a Philip 100%, because then, like, that your perception is like not a good survivor player. Let me bring this person along. And then, but you know that you're a good survivor player. I feel like if Hunter were called a Philip, that would be a good thing for Hunter. It lowers your threat level. For Banu here being called a Philip, it might be true that he is more like a follower rather than a leader. But I think if you were an actually good survivor player, you want to be called a Philip by someone else, because then it shows like the perception of you isn't that strong. So then maybe you can manipulate people later on.
I think again, it really depends. Being told you're a Philip when you are a Philip would be insulting. So I guess maybe does Banu not think he's a Philip? Like that's the thing that kind of gets me. Like yes, if you're Hunter, you want to be called a Philip because you want to kind of do threat management. But like if you're actually a Philip, you probably don't want to be called a Philip. Like no one wants to admit that they're the goat.
I'm wondering if Banu doesn't know who Philip is, right? Because I don't think he's seen that much of Survivor. I think like it was his partner that was a super fan, but Banu got cast.
Yeah, I don't know for sure how much of Survivor he's seen. So that could be a possible explanation. It, yeah.
I'm like, it's a double whammy here. Q calling him a Philip and a liability in one episode. Like, I think from Q's points of view, he is seeing Banu as someone who's potentially loyal. Like, you want someone like that, but I don't feel like Banu is necessarily the best person to bring as your GOAT, because sure, Banu might be loyal, but I think Banu might not necessarily follow each of your plans that easily. Because it
Mm-hmm.
like he seems very emotional, like they've said in the show. It seems like if maybe your plan was to vote out someone he liked, maybe he wouldn't want to go along with it, kind of thing.
And I mean, I think the other thing that keeps getting brought up is the fact that Banu just like can't keep his mouth shut. Like we see it happen again this episode, and I feel like that's definitely also a liability, something you don't really want from someone on your team. So I definitely think that Banu's days are numbered. But also, we've seen people be, the prospective first boot and then end up winning the whole thing. So maybe they're doing maybe he's gonna have a breakout episode, and I don't know. I feel like right now Bonnie's a great character but not a great player, and maybe one day he'll be a great player and a great character.
Yeah, I'm like, to me, liability, Banu, I think it feels more like Banu's a loose cannon. He's a wild card. If you were looking for, as Q said, someone to coach up, someone that you can bring under your wing, I feel like you'd want someone who's loyal, someone who's maybe not smart at the game, someone that's not making their own plans. They'll follow your plan easily. Like, you don't want your student to supersede you later on, or to do stuff that isn't in your best interest if you're really trying to make them like a goat or a follower. I think, as we've seen this season thus far, I don't think Banu is the person you want to be the follower here, because he can just do what he wants and say what he wants, and it could F you over.
Yeah, but he's also not really the person you want to be the leader because, as he told Kenzie, he basically just doesn't have a plan. So maybe he needs to get one.
I thought Q was funny here when he says sometimes wackadoodles do win, and then the wackadoodles win became the title of the episode. And later on, we also hear that Banu doesn't really want to win $1 million. He wants to win 1,000,000 hearts.
I gotta say, that was like the cringiest thing to me. I heard it and I literally rolled my eyes because I was like, don't tell people you don't want $1 million. Like, come on, you're here to win. Snap, snap. I also think it's interesting because Banu might be winning some hearts, but I also feel like I've seen a lot of people who are just like, I don't like him. He's too much. So I would really love a survey where they like survey people. Like, if you are one of the hearts that Banu has won, please fill out this survey so we can get an accurate number.
Yeah, like, will he win 1,000,000 hearts? Yes or no? It's like the opposite of Liz talking about how much money she has. I was sort of sad she didn't bring it up this episode, but, like, Banu here is the opposite. "Oh, I don't want the money," and Liz is talking about how much money she does have, but I feel like they are similar sides of the same coin. Banu is definitely not doing this in, like, an intentional way of strategy, like, oh, like Hunter we see aloof, "I just wanna build shelter, I don't want to win," and push off that kind of persona. I think Banu genuinely doesn't care about winning and genuinely just wants to, like, be a character for TV, get fans for TikTok, stuff like that. So, if it were strategy and you're saying, "Yeah, I don't care about winning. I just want fans. I want to win hearts." Like, that'd be a fun interesting strategy, fine strategy to see if people would believe it and think you're not threatening. Like, "Oh, this person doesn't really care. Let's bring them along further because they don't really care about winning. Let's just bring them along."
I also feel like, though, having it be your strategy to just be a good character in order to, like, get TikTok famous or whatever, also questionable. Like, you can't control whether or not you're going to be edited in a certain way. And I also just, it feels kind of weird to me to be like, I'm going to go on Survivor just to be a big character. Like, I'm not even sure that's what Banu is doing. I think that's just Banu's personality.
Yeah, because I think he's like a social media person already. Like his job was the social media stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So Banu not care about winning. Banu wants to win hearts. We go to Green Team and they do an idol flashback, which I guess does make sense. It was like, 4 days ago, hee hee. Like, we wouldn't want to see all of the Beware advantages all found in one episode back to back, like keeping it chronological, because then we would see potentially three very similar Beware Advantage idol finds in episode one, which would be very boring. So it does make sense that they're split up between these first three episodes. But yeah, it was like, oh, dang, 4 days ago. This is great.
Yeah, I feel like it's hard because I guess they haven't been that good at hiding the Beware advantages if everyone found it really quickly. So I do like that they kind of broke it up a little. I also think this was good just because we haven't been seeing as much of the Green Tribe. I feel like we've seen a lot of Purple because they're the Hot Mess Express. We've seen a lot of Orange because they're the tribe with like a lot of big characters between like Venus and Soda and Tevin. So I feel like we've seen a lot of Purple and Orange and not as much of Green. So seeing a little bit more of them because of Gem finding the Beware advantage this episode was good.
Yeah, Jem finds the Beware advantage, but Charlie was close. He got the little shot of him walking near the tree, and it like flicked on the screen of the Beware advantage with him in the shot. But alas, Charlie does not find it. Jem finding that same spot again in the dark was pretty wild to me because, like, you have no light. You have no lantern. She didn't bring any like fire or anything over with her to use as a light. I was like, dang, how'd you find it in the dark?
I assumed that it must have been like a very like recognizable tree, like one on a path that they walk pretty often, because that would explain how she found it, and then also maybe make the Beware advantage a little bit more dangerous. Because if it's a common path to be walking, and then someone finds the like box that if someone finds you trying to dig up the box, there's going to be questions. So that's my idea. It could also be that one of the camera people had a light because, OSHA probably makes it so that camera people aren't allowed to be walking around in pitch darkness, but who knows?
Yeah, I want to know, like, are they wearing like nighttime goggles, the camera people, so they can see? Because I'm like, I've been camping, and when you're out there, it is literally pitch black. So I'm like, I would not be wandering the paths at night, and then you might step on something or walk into something. So I do wonder, like, is there like a little headlamp on the camera stuff so then there is light, or was she literally like walking in the dark?
Someone who has been a camera person for Survivor, please let us know the answer to these burning questions. Another like thing I noticed about Jem in the dark though is she didn't put the box back like in the hole she dug. She put it under like some vines and stuff. And I'm wondering, like, maybe that seemed like a good hiding place in the dark when you can't see that well anyway. But in the light, I would love if someone else like accidentally stumbles upon this box that Jem hid because she didn't bury it. So it's easier to find. I want someone else to find it and be like, yo, what the hell?
Yeah, we gotta go find the key to unlock the box. It's a new birdcage idol. But with
Exactly.
Gem too, she also, when she's reading the parchment, says, "Oh, if your team never loses, there will be further instructions." So I feel like because this is the first time we've heard someone verbalize this rule with the Beware advantages, I want to say Green probably never loses an immunity challenge before the merge.
Yeah, I imagine that is the case as well. Which is kind of boring, just because I feel like we kind of touched on this last week, but it's kind of boring when there's three tribes and one of them is like the loser tribe and the other two are great. So, mm, yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of greatness, Hunter, very talented at a lot of different things. First, he's very talented at building. And so then we see other people on the orange team. They're saying, oh, Hunter's very strong. Let's not vote him out yet because he brings tribe strength to the challenges. He's building like this fake bed here at camp. We just think Hunter is here for the adventure. He's just here for the fun. I feel like this scene is very good content for Hunter. We learn about his backstory from like the medical school stuff. Then he turned to teaching. And then we see his house and we see all of these survivor puzzles where he has a crap ton of survivor puzzles in his house. And I'm like, yo, I want to see some more vlogs of all of these puzzles that he's built for his students and for himself. I'm like, this is really good content for Hunter. I think it makes him seem like very likable, makes him seem very intelligent on the island, and he's managing that threat level well.
Yeah, I think another thing is some people have been talking about how like Carson was labeled like a nerd for having built survivor puzzles before he came onto the island, and Hunter is being received very differently for doing the same thing. And I feel like it matters to me at least that Hunter wasn't necessarily building the challenges for himself. He was building it for like the kids that he teaches. That makes it so much more wholesome because it's not like, oh, I'm going to try to build every challenge so that I can like hack my way through Survivor. It's like I love Survivor and I want to share it with the kids that I know
Yeah,
I'm
I
teaching.
agree. I feel like adding the teaching aspect and like building it for students and using his free time to build it for the students makes it seem more wholesome than like, oh, I'm doing it for myself, which isn't, there's nothing necessarily wrong with just building them in like your backyard for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But Venus, we hear, says Hunter is dangerous. Her and Brandon talk, where Venus is basically saying, yeah, Tevin and Hunter are the power duo. We've sort of seen that in the edit thus far between Hunter and Tevin having their alliance that is named in episode 1. So I feel like this is a good read from Venus, even if she's low key maybe on the outs of this tribe right now.
I think it's interesting because I feel like Venus is having good reads, but the way
Mhm.
she's like carrying herself isn't necessarily like coming across very well. Because Randon is like, okay, I believe you, but can you like explain this to me? And she's just like, I know it because I have eyes. And like, that might be true. But I think also when only one person is willing to be your ally, you should maybe think about like treating them a little bit more respectfully. Like, that seems like the kind of thing that you should say in a confessional and not to your ally's face. Like, be calm, be direct, be like, I see it in this, and this, and then go bitch to the camera about, like, what do you mean? How do I see it? I see it because I have eyes. So I think it's very interesting because, again, it's one of those things where you can, like, be saying things that are all true, but if you come across the wrong way, it can kind of blow up your game.
Yeah, I feel like you've got to like have the receipts in Survivor, but also sometimes with certain things not Survivor related, it's just, a woman's intuition. You just get the vibes that something's off and then you just know it. You just don't have any receipts. You just know it. That's what Venus is going off of. Women's intuition.
I feel like that's hard though, because a lot of times people's intuition is wrong. Like if people's intuition was perfect, then no one would ever get voted out with an idol in their pocket, you know?
They didn't have the women's intuition. So we get to the immunity challenge. You have to go in the ocean, go over crates. You get to work together in order to get over a big rolling barrel, do a net ramp, and then you have to land some sandbags on these podiums. Orange team is in dead last, but then they catch up. Hunter throwing the sandbags, more good content, literally wins it for the team here. I also thought it was smart strategy of like Hunter using Tevin to pull him over the barrel. I thought that was very interesting considering like Randon sat out of the challenge because of his arm. And so it's like literally Hunter, Tevin, and two smaller women. It's going to be hard for them to like pull him over kind of thing. So I thought it was intuitive and good, innovative thinking.
Yeah, it was good just because I think it's always hardest when you're the last person, like up or over. So making that a really easy process and kind of letting gravity help you, that was really smart.
I agree. So Orange, they win first, and then it's basically down to Charlie versus Q and Tiffany subbing in for second place on the sandbag portion. It was very, very close between these two teams, but alas, Charlie pulls it out, wins it for green, second place, and so purple is in last place again and feels bad for them, similar to like other seasons where one team just sort of sucks a lot and they can't seem to find their footing and win challenges. Feels bad here seeing this group of four just be so close to in winning and then not having that win and just being so sad and down.
Something that happened this episode that I'm also really curious about is in Hunter's video showing like all of his survivor stuff, he mentioned having sandbags. And then later in the episode, someone, I think maybe Banu, says like, "Oh, we couldn't have practice for this." And I'm kind of like, "But did Hunter practice for this?" Because the idea of like throwing up a sandbag to hit a small target, I feel like has been in Survivor for at least in the new era. There's been more than one challenge that's had, you know, you throw up a sandbag to get on a certain target. Has Hunter been in his backyard practicing throwing sandbags onto like tiny little platforms? Because if so, and that's the reason why they won, I feel like I need confirmation of this.
Yeah, or even like practicing your wrist movements, because if it's not like throwing up, you could try like cornhole style, like throwing forward to hit targets. We've seen that in Survivor a lot, so maybe he has practiced like sandbag throwing, wrist movements, hitting targets, or like using a slingshot. That would be good to practice, and sometimes people can't use a slingshot on Survivor kind of thing. All good, like weird skills to have that you might be able to practice in your backyard if you truly wanted to.
Yeah, but I guess also it's totally different when you have the pressures of Survivor on you, like having other people yelling at you, knowing that if you don't do this, you might go home. So even practicing in your backyard might not be enough.
True. You got to practice with people yelling at you next. But Purple loses. They still don't have their flint. They haven't had a flint this entire game, which I'm sort of questioning like, okay, great. But like, what's the point for us as the viewers? It doesn't really add to the show. It just seems like Purple is suffering needlessly because they probably don't have fire. How are they like cooking anything, eating anything besides like the raw coconuts? Like, well, I think we should just give them back the flint. Why do we need to keep taking it away? Especially when it's been a week now and you haven't been able to make fire and like you're going to just continue to keep losing because you can't have the basic necessities.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things that's difficult in the new era is that being down one person on a six-person tribe is already a huge disadvantage. And then being down one person and also not having eaten, like I, I feel like it's almost too much, especially because we do get these like loser tribes who like keep losing and go like a week without flint. I feel like at some
Mhm.
point you just got to be like, you know, maybe you make the loser go without flint for the first 3 days, but then after that they're fine, you know?
Yeah, I'm like it's not nothing for the viewers. Like I don't care to see them crying and suffering all the time. Like, make it so, and I feel like we've talked about this so much, like, make it so the players have enough brain power to actually play the game, because that's how you get better TV. To have people tired all the time, crying all the time, suffering all the time, that's less good TV because they can't strategize and they can't play the game because they've got no food or mental energy to even think.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those things where they kind of like to make it out to be like so much harder than it is. Like Jeff kind of likes it when they are like, I can't even think because I'm so tired, and like crying constantly because he thinks that makes better TV, but it doesn't really.
I feel like it gets old very fast. So, because Orange wins, they get to choose who's going on the journey. So they pick Liz, and then Liz picks Ben and Banu. And with the episode title, I was like, this is the Wackadoodle crew. Like, these are the three Wackadoodles, literally.
Yeah, that definitely is the Wackadoodle crew, and just I feel like this journey was so much, so much.
It was so funny too. We see like Tiffany saying, Banu's probably spilling all the beans at the journey, and then cut to literally Banu spilling all the beans at the journey. Banu just starts crying to Liz and Ben, and I'm like, yo, if I were there and I just met this dude and he starts crying and telling us his life story, getting down on our knees to hug him, I'd be like, yo, I am trying not to laugh.
Yeah, I feel like it's just so over the top. And I guess it might be Bonner's one of those people who seems like really genuine and really sweet in like short bursts. But then once you have to live with him, you're like, oh my God, I can't stand this guy. So on the journey, they're like, oh my God, Bonner's so sweet. How would anyone want to vote him out? Why is he on the bottom? And then once you actually like go to live with him, like if he makes it to the merge and you have to live with him, you're like, oh my God, now I get why people wanted to vote him out.
Yeah, it made Ben and Liz seem so nice. They were, like, comforting him, making him feel good, while also keeping a straight face. Because I don't know how none of them just didn't, like, look at the camera and be like, "Yo, is this serious?" Crack a little bit of a smile, "Is this guy acting with us?" Because 'Cause I'd be like, "There's no way. This is real life happening right now, like, this is so funny. I am honored to be a part of this." But they were smart. They kept a straight face, they were comforting him, and they got all of the good information out of him with, like, barely even trying.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those things where if I were in that situation, I'd be like, am I being punked? And then once I realized that I wasn't being punked, I would just try to milk him for all he's worth.
Yeah, like, "Oh, Banu, I feel so bad for you, like, so tell me more."
Exactly.
What did she really say about that? Like, milk it for all it's worth, because Banu literally was an open book, so purple team saying that he would spill the beans were correct.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting though. He like quotes them as saying that he's a fool. I don't remember them saying that. I wonder if that was something that we just weren't shown or if Banu was editorializing a little bit. So,
It seemed like it might have been editorializing, but it also could be the case that it wasn't shown on TV and they did say that. Because then if they did actually say that, that is a little bit rude. But if he's like changing their wording, like the fold hold thing, then it's a little different.
yeah. I mean, I feel like if they had actually said it, they might have done a little flashback to show them saying it, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, so I thought it was also funny. Ben and Liz go back to camp and then they're like, we've got the tea. They spill the beans that Banu spilled to them. And I was like, yo, telling all of this tea to Ben and Liz's teams respectively, like, it makes them look so much more trustworthy because then if they do lie about the actual advantage stuff, they're like, oh, we told you so much about the other team's tribe dynamics. Like Banu said, Kenzie's the mastermind. Banu said Q and Tiffany are so close. All of this, like they can sort of hide the actual advantage stuff and the challenge they had to do behind, we told you so much stuff, all this good information.
Mm-hmm. I also feel like for all the people who went on the journey, there's a really easy way to just be like, oh yeah, we all drew rocks. The person who drew the white rock, like didn't have to do it. Just be like, and I drew the white rock. Like, that's all you got to know.
Yeah, so they do have to draw rocks that compete for the advantage, where if you do compete, you have the potential to lose your vote. If you get the white rock, you get no chance to play the game. I feel like they shouldn't have to draw rocks here, but I feel like it would have been interesting if they let it up to the three on the journey to decide who gets to play and who doesn't. Maybe would have been less interesting here because Banu probably would have just opted not to play to not lose his vote, and Liz and Ben would have played the game. But I think it would be interesting to see, like, okay, four different people. Are people willing to risk it, or are they willing to step back, kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that would have been interesting. But then also, you kind of get it where one person gets the short end of the stick, and at least this way, it was totally random who got the short end of the stick rather than it being kind of predetermined.
So yeah, Liz doesn't get to play. Ben and Banu go and do this cube puzzle. This is one you got to do at home. Now people got to make this one in their house because Ben and Banu both lose. For Ben losing his vote, I feel like with Jem getting the idol, Ben losing his vote, Charlie, Maria, if Jem does tell them about the Boyer advantage, if she does get the idol later, I feel like Charlie and Maria would probably go with the girls and not the Ben and Tim side if they went to tribal, but also they probably maybe don't go to tribal since they seem like a fine team in challenges. But I do think it was smart of Ben to lie about the advantage and just say, yeah, I don't know if I have my vote or not until tribal council, rather than telling everyone, yeah, I lost my vote.
Yeah, I think the I don't know whether or not I have my vote is good because then people still have to plan as if he doesn't have his vote, but they could also be screwed over if they only plan as if they don't have his vote, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the not knowing until tribal is good because then you still get included in conversations compared to if you told people you don't have a vote, they might, like he said, try to vote you out, or they might exclude you from conversations because, hey, this person is useless to me at this point in time because they can't even vote. So let's make an alliance without him, or we don't even need to tell him any plan because it doesn't matter. He can't vote. He has no say in this tribal.
Exactly.
So Banu also lies and he tells the entire group that he got the white rock, so he didn't get to compete. But then he tells Q the real story and that he lost his vote actually.
Yeah, I wonder why, like, why even tell someone? Just like, if you know you're going to go home anyway, like, what's the point?
I feel like it goes to show like Banu and Q's previous conversation with the Philip stuff maybe works with Banu and Banu trusts Q. He doesn't trust the women on the team to tell this information, but he trusts Q enough that maybe Q could save him. And I guess he realizes, okay, I don't have a vote, so Q needs to sway Tiffany for us to vote Kenzie out.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, we hear that Q wants to vote himself out. I was like, what the heck is happening? He feels bad because he let the team down at the immunity challenge and now he wants to be voted out because he couldn't clutch up the win in the challenge. I was like, okay, I guess. And then he goes into talking about his high school football career. And Alyssa and I have talked about when people talk about high school and how just talking about high school as a grown person is funny in general. But then Q gets this like football cheering background music and he goes into this sad saga of how he was ridiculed in the newspaper from his high school town. I was like, dang, this is sort of funny, but sort of sucks as like a high schooler to go through.
I think also one of the things is Q has like a billion siblings. So if you have as many siblings as he has, maybe you hold on to like the one thing that makes you special and being like the star football player. Maybe like he's the only one of his siblings that played football. So football was really important to him. So I kind of get it, especially if the newspaper like ridicules him. Like, damn.
Yeah, don't want to be from one of those small football towns that really likes your football team.
Exactly.
So I feel like in the moment, Q is probably sad and like bummed about losing the challenge for the team. But I feel like at Tribal Council, if they went, I don't think he's actually going to be asking people to vote him out. It was probably just in the heat of the moment, feeling bad about losing the challenge and feeling bad about voting someone out. I don't think at Tribal Q would be like, vote me out. I'm going to martyr here. I think he would play the game.
I think also it could be an interesting strategy to see whether or not people are willing to vote you out. Because if you're like, I'm the one who screwed up, just vote me out, and people are like, sure, then you kind of are like, whoa, wait a second, maybe I'm not as like secure as I thought I was. But then when people were to Q just being like, we're not going to do that, like that's dumb. And it definitely didn't even feel like they were doing it in a like, oh no, of course we're not going to vote you out way. Like it was like genuine that they weren't going to vote him out. I think that could be helpful for like knowing your position in the tribe.
They're like STFUQ. Like you're talking whack right now. This you can't. Why would we vote you out? That would be so dumb because then we'll definitely lose challenges more without you here.
Mm-hmm.
But Q, we hear wants to vote out Kenzie because Kenzie is a threat going into that liability versus threat talk. I feel like, yes, this makes sense. Like Kenzie would be a threat. Kenzie is probably more likely to flip and make friends. Although I do think, like we've talked about, it depends on the kind of liability you're bringing around. If it's a follower liability, fine. If it's a loose cannon liability, I think that's more dangerous because they're a wackadoodle. They are going to do whatever they want. They're not maybe just going to follow you. Then I think you vote that kind of liability, loose cannon, out because they're less easily controllable. I do think Kenzie as a threat, I think you could use her as a shield potentially going into merge because people could see her as very fun, very gregarious. Like, why wouldn't you want to work with her? That makes her dangerous. Let's try to vote her out, especially after Banu, like, bad mouthing Kenzie to the other teams. Like, you want Kenzie around now.
Yeah. Lord Almighty. I feel like Banu is he's messing up the Purple Tribe bad.
Yeah, like Banu telling everyone Kenzie's the mastermind over Q and Tiffany. Q and Tiffany are just close friends, but Kenzie's the mastermind here. Yeah, you want to keep her around because people will target her probably over your strong duo relationship.
Yeah, oh Lord. I'm also interested to see like what the other people are going to do with this information. Like, do they immediately target Kenzie, or do they like see whether or not Banu's information was accurate first?
True. Like, do they fact check it or do they just run with it? But it does seem like everyone else on the entire season knows that Kenzie's the mastermind on Purple. Because it's like, why wouldn't you share that if you were Ben and Liz? It puts someone else higher on the like pedestal to go home. And it's like, yeah, that person's a threat because they're a mastermind. Doesn't really matter if it's true or not. Just vote them out before you vote me out.
Mm-hmm.
I would have wanted to known though if Q actually did convince Tiffany to vote Kenzie out here or not. So it would have been interesting to see if they went to tribal. Did Q get his way or did Tiffany get her way? Like, was Banu going or was Kenzie going here?
I feel like it had to have been Banu going out. They wouldn't have made such a big deal about like, Banu needs a miracle if Banu wasn't actually the one going home.
Guess we'll never know. Maybe Purple will lose again next week, but Banu has his prayers answered. Unfortunately for Randon, Randon gets medically evacuated this episode. I feel like Randon should be invited back, similar to like Bruce being invited back. Earlier in the episode, we learned that like Randon waking up, he's limp on his right side, think it's just because he slept weird, gets checked by medical. Later in the game, now he's getting removed from the game. Like it could be a super serious neck or brain issue or a potential lifelong injury. So it does make sense for him to get pulled. I think it's just sad seeing people get pulled for medevacs and not getting voted out.
Yeah, I also think it's kind of frustrating because US Survivor does it a little different from foreign survivors, where in some foreign survivors, like you can go to the hospital for a night just to be checked out and then come back into the game. And I feel like this is something where Randon could have flown to a hospital, gotten his MRI, and then come back after he knew that everything was okay. And I feel like that would have worked so much better and been so much less frustrating, because like it's one thing if someone like has an active medical situation that definitely needs care, but then it's a different thing if it's like, okay, we're just doing this out of an abundance of caution. So yeah.
I agree. Like the 24-hour rule in like Australian Survivor is the main example, would make sense. I feel like for Randon though, he probably would have been pulled anyways, because in like the exit stuff he was saying it took like months of PT to even get his like hand and arm to work again. So even after that MRI, like maybe not the brain serious issue, like future paralyzation kind of thing, but it does seem like he had a big problem that probably should not be on Survivor for.
Mm-hmm.
But Randon also said he tried to give the Beware advantage stuff to Venus, but like he didn't really have time. He couldn't pass it off to her. So it'll be interesting to see, like, does it get rehidden on Orange, or does Venus just find the box randomly and dig in that spot? Because like you don't necessarily need that first clue. You just need to know where the box is to, when you lose immunity, find the box location.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting because Dalton Ross like interviewed Jeff, and Jeff basically said Randon could have been like, "Hold on, I got to give Venus my advantage," and they would have let him do that. But I'm also like, who is being told that they're about to be medically evacuated and thinking like, "Hold on, I got to pause so I can give my ally my advantage." So,
Yeah, I don't think you might be thinking it, but you're also probably not. You're probably more sad.
mm-hmm.
But then Randon, sad scene, cut to Banu. So funny. Jeff comes to Purple Camp and Jeff is saying, one person's loss is another person's gain. There is no tribal council tonight. Immediate cut to Banu confessional. He's screaming and he's happy again, the biggest smile on his face. That juxtaposition of like Randon's team being so sad, cut to Banu being so happy. And like this entire episode, Banu was sad in all these confessionals and crying, to now Banu is Banu again, and he's able to be happy because his prayers have been answered and he has a miracle.
Yeah, like I said, Banu is just like very, he's a lot. He's got a big personality, and I feel bad. I hope that Randon didn't see this and call him up and be like, dude, why were you celebrating me being hurt? Just because I feel like having Jeff be like, oh yeah, someone got medevaced, and then Banu immediately being like, yay, was kind of like whiplash.
Ah, it was, I'm like, this is so poetic. Like, if Survivor were scripted, you would script it like this because it's just so funny. Like, Banu does not even feel bad. He's like, oh, shoot, sorry, Randon. Like, great for me. I get to stay another day. It's just so funny.
Mm-hmm.
But Banu then goes on to tell Jeff about how he had his exit speech prepared because he was going to get voted out tonight. He wanted to share with Jeff how he's going to win 1,000,000 hearts. And then Jeff is just standing there, like, awkwardly smiling. It was also so funny.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was a great episode. It just, so many random things happened, and I was like, what the heck is happening? It was a fun episode, I thought.
It was a fun episode. I feel like it's kind of frustrating because since Randon got medically evacuated, we didn't really see anything move forward. I feel like it kind of keeps everything the same because Venus and Randon were on the bottom. Now it's just Venus in the bottom on her own. So, not really a status quo shift. Purple got saved. It was just kind of meh.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see next time who loses immunity. I don't know. I'm like, I sort of want to see some from the other tribes, so hopefully Purple doesn't lose again, but they're down so many players that maybe they might just keep losing.
Yeah. I feel like I saw this online somewhere, but people were saying that the losing tribe should get to pick who sits out from the other teams So maybe make it more fair by having it be like, the three weaker players on another tribe against the purple tribe. So
Yeah, I'm excited for next week. It's always a fun time on Wednesdays. Let us know in the comments down below what you thought of this episode. Did you think it was funny seeing how sad Banu was to how happy he was? Are you getting annoyed with Banu's antics? Do you think Randon should be invited back to Survivor? Let us know in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching, and we will see you all next